Good evening, everyone. As Divya said, so we were being gripped by COVID-19, and you can say that in Trivandrum, and I believe in the rest of Kerala as well, we have been having a co-circulation of dengue, chikungunya, and COVID-19. So all these three diseases can present as fever with rash, and now we have a new DD to that, that is Zika virus. So it is not about the 18 cases and the 3 probable. Out of the 70 samples tested, we have around say 21 confirmed plus probable. Means that in fever with rash, if you test in Trivandrum, around 30% of the cases will be Zika. Okay. Now there are 2 ways of approaching this problem. Because Zika clinically, so those who have been seeing Zika, because in Trivandrum for the last 2 to 3 months, we have been having this syndrome, that is a fever with rash, which is sort of a benign chikungunya. That is, all the features of chikungunya will be there, like the pleuritic rash and all. But then this arthritis will be actually a very mild arthritis, and it used to resolve within 7 days or so. And so in public health lab, we could do this dengue PCR as well as chikungunya PCR. This is the most tricky aspect because to diagnose chikungunya within the first 7 days, you can rely on the IgM. For dengue, we have the NS1. So we used to send the chikungunya PCR, and in certain cases, the PCR used to come as negative. In certain cases, it used to come as positive. And that is why, Dr. Rajalashmi as well as Dr. Nias, the ID consultants in the hospital where this disease got diagnosed. It is not about the suspicion did not arise when they saw a pregnant lady with fever, arthralgia, and non-purulent conjunctivitis. They have been having this suspicion. For all the clinicians in Trivandrum have been having some suspicion that an exanthem other than this chikungunya or dengue is present in Trivandrum for the last 2 months, and they had this outbreak among their staff. Around 22 samples had been sent to NIV around say 1.5 months back, and they did all the multiplex PCRs. That is, a fever with rash. It is not about dengue or chikungunya or measles or rubella. You have all sorts of adenovirus and all those things. So they did the multiplex PCR, and all the investigations came as negative, and that is how. So they sort of zeroed in on the diagnosis of a fever, arthralgia, a non-purulent conjunctivitis with rash. And so if 2 of the symptoms are present, one of the DDs happen to be Zika. And that is how their mind got trained to how to confirm the diagnosis of Zika for that pregnant lady, where they send the sample to a private lab in Coimbatore. Okay. So there are 2 ways of approaching the problem of Zika. So one is that in Asia, we do have data from Singapore as well as NIV data from India regarding the outbreaks we had in India. So till now, we never had any case of say microcephaly or any birth defects or a Guillain-Barré syndrome or any transverse myelitis. This is because even though the Brazilian strain is also from the Asian lineage, there are 2 mutations which leads to this enhanced neurovirulence and increased transmissibility. That is the S139N as well as A188V, which were not till now diagnosed in. Detected in any of the isolates from India. But the problem is we are dealing with an RNA virus, and RNA virus, the capable of, since their proofreading mechanism is a bit defective, so they can have say around 15 to 20 base pair mutations per year. And if they pick up these mutations, probably we are going to have this neurovirulence as well. So during which outbreak these mutations will be picked up, we have absolutely no idea. And we are eagerly waiting for the sequencing report from NIV. Suppose these mutations are not there, it will just going to be just another fever with rash. Okay, that is probably we may end up, since we don't have that much of kids and all, we may end up brushing it under the carpet. But suppose these mutations are there, then we need to have this abundant caution. So in Kerala, from the COVID response itself, we know that our state is known for abundant caution. So abundant caution means that is it an easy disease to treat? Absolutely no, because the surveillance might involve multiple departments. For example, today the PEDS outbreak monitoring unit meeting in Trivandrum Medical College. So the specialists involved were from community medicine, infectious diseases, pediatric neurology. Then we had the gynecologist, and we had the microbiologist, and we had the radio diagnosis people also. How to frame these guidelines with regard to the frequency at which the fetal ultrasound should be done in suspected cases of the pregnant ladies with the Zika. Because thing is that we have been listening to all the lectures, and we said that any pregnant lady with fever with rash should be screened. And we have also been talking that 80% of the cases will be asymptomatic. The chance of the transmitting it to the fetus from asymptomatic as well as the symptomatic, as the studies say, is almost the same. Okay, so that is the problem. So the radio diagnosis has to be involved, and then transfusion medicine department also. Why transfusion medicine? Because it can be transmitted through blood transfusion as well. So this is how we should be addressing this issue. And as of now, we don't have any clear-cut guidelines from the center or the state addressing all these aspects. We have only generic or broad guidelines. And we know what the Zika virus is. It's a single-stranded RNA virus from the genus Flavivirus, family Flaviviridae. And we are familiar with the sisters of Zika virus, the dengue, chikungunya, the Japanese encephalitis, and West Nile virus, which is sort of endemic in Kerala. And now in Trivandrum, and I believe in the rest of Kerala as well, we are having the co-circulation of all these three viruses, dengue, chikungunya, as well as Zika, going together. And it decides if you don't have access to this PCR, we have to diagnose based on our clinical ability. And it is transmitted through the bite of Aedes aegypti as well as Albopicus. So this regarding the origin of Zika, the most important thing is it was named after the Zika forest in Entebbe in Uganda in 1947. They identified during yellow fever surveillance in a rhesus monkey. Okay, so that you can have sylvatic cycle as well. It was in 1953 that the first human case got identified in Nigeria. And this is a very, very important thing that's taking through the timeline of the Zika virus infection. So initially in Nigeria in 1953, the virus was isolated. And after that, you're having, say, two lineages. You're having the East African, West African lineage, that's the African lineage, as well as the Asian lineage. And then till around 2007, we have been having the sporadic outbreaks of Zika virus in Asia, in Southeast Asia, as well as in Africa. We had only sporadic cases, not outbreaks. And the first outbreak was diagnosed in Yap Island, let's say Pacific Island, in 2007, where around 73% of the population got infected. So what happened here? So probably occurrence of some mutations, so that the Asian lineage or the African lineage, some mutations were occurred. So that increased the transmissibility, and around 73% of the population got infected in Yap Island in 2007. Followed by the outbreak in French Polynesia in 2013-14, which is also a Pacific island, where around 66% of the population got infected. And it is during this outbreak that they identified association between the Guillain-Barré syndrome and Zika virus infection. And retrospective studies showed the presence of increased prevalence of microcephaly in French Polynesia. And in Brazil, in 2014-15, they had multiple sporting events, including the FIFA World Cup. Also, some rowing competition where the participants were from the Pacific Islands, and they had the major outbreak in 2015 and 16 in Brazil. And it is during Brazil that the current literature, what we know about the pathogenesis of say Guillain-Barré syndrome or say the microcephaly, everything comes from Brazil. And that is spread through the entire South America, Central America, and luckily for everyone, it's spread to USA as well. Why luckily for everyone? Because we have enough and more literature. We have very good guidelines from CDC and WHO of what to do in pregnancy. So what to do with regard to sexual transmission. So for how long you should practice safe sex, etc. The transplantation guidelines. All these things are there because somehow it reached USA. And in February 2016, the WHO declared it as a public health emergency of international concern. And regarding the India story, Dr. Lakshmi did take you through India story in a very, very beautiful fashion. So the most important aspect is that when we do the zero survey data, so the dark ones are the areas where you are having locally acquired this Zika virus infection. That's you can see in the South America, the Central America, North America, as well as the Pacific Islands. The other shaded area, that is Africa, as well as the light shade in India, the zero surveys which were done as early as 1950s showed the presence of the neutralizing antibody against Zika virus. So if you look in that way, in Africa and India to an extent, as Southeast Asia, the zero surveys which were done as early as 1952 and all did show the evidence of the neutralizing antibody against the Zika virus. And 16.5% of the samples tested in India, including Madras, showed this neutralizing antibody against Zika virus. So we do have some endogenous strain, but it is not responsible for any outbreaks or neurovirulence. So this is another slide showing the current and past exposure to the Zika virus. So the most important aspect I would like to highlight is the dark, so I just not pink, the dark brown shade is the areas where the Zika virus associated neurological complications, that is the Guillain-Barré syndrome, the transverse myelitis, as well as the microcephaly has been reported from countries shaded in the dark brown, that is from the Central America, the Pacific Islands, as well as from South America and North America. Whereas the lighter shade are areas where you have this endogenous strain, but neurovirulence or microcephaly has not yet been reported. This is the importance of having the mutations which increase the neurovirulence, that is the S139N as well as the A188V. Suppose the sequencing which is being done in NIV now says that the current strain which is circulating in Kerala also do not have those mutations which might impart increased neurovirulence or the risk of microcephaly, then probably it is not going to be a major problem for us. Okay, but then we need to, the surveillance etc. have to be to go on in all the higher risk groups. But suppose the sequencing identifies these two mutations, then we need to be very, very careful. So basically we are having, say, two lineages, the Asian as well as the African lineage. And from the Asian lineage, you can see that the outbreaks which occurred in Brazil, etc., also can be traced back to the Asian lineage, but the mutations are a bit different. That is why the previous speaker said that what has been circulating in India or led to the outbreaks in Rajasthan, Gujarat, as well as Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Singapore, other areas, never had these mutations which increase the neurovirulence. And we hope and we pray that such mutations won't be there during the current outbreak in Kerala also. This is a distribution of Aedes aegypti as well as albopicus. Now coming to the transmission, the bite of an infected mosquito, the maternal fetal transmission, sex including vaginal, anal and oral sex, the blood product transfusion, organ transplantation and lab exposure. And some of the questions which did come up, I will be trying to answer. Zika virus RNA has been detected in blood, urine, semen, saliva, female genital tract secretions, CSF, amniotic fluid and breast milk. And as Dr. Anju Kanmani correctly mentioned, even though it is present in breast milk, the guidelines do not advocate against breastfeeding. So it is said that the breastfeeding should go on. Now coming to the presence of the RNA in blood, in non-pregnant individuals with Zika virus infection, Zika virus RNA is usually detected in serum for about 2 weeks. But we say that when you are sending the PCR, it should be sent ideally within 7 days of symptom onset. In old blood, it may be detected as late as 81 days. And most important aspect is that RNA try to persist in RNA is found to persist in the serum of pregnant ladies more than that in non-pregnant ladies. That is, Zika virus RNA has been detected in serum as late as 107 days in pregnant ladies. And we know that in urine, the RNA, the virus may be isolated up to say 14 to 20 days. When you take serum as 7 days, in urine you may be able to identify for around 14 to 20 days. The RNA usually clears from urine after about 6 weeks. The Zika virus RNA has been detected in urine up to 91 days after onset of illness. Now coming to the most important aspect for how long will the virus persist in semen. So it will be there when no longer detectable in blood. So it usually clears from semen after about 3 months, but has been detected in semen up to 198 days after onset of illness. But then the molecular studies as well as the culture etc. have shown that in cases where Zika virus RNA persisted in semen of for more than 6 months, the RNA positive semen samples were infectious in only 4% of cases. Even in cases where the RNA was isolated even after 6 months, when cell culture and plaque assay were done, it was found to be infective only in around 4% of cases. And now the consensus is that based on the cell culture studies, the infectivity was observed only in samples obtained within 30 days after illness onset with a viral load more than 7 log RNA copies per ml of semen. So sexual transmission has been noted as late as 41 days after a partner's onset of symptoms, and infectious Zika virus in semen has been detected as late as 69 days after onset of semen. And this virus can also be present in the endocervical secretions And this RNA has also been detected in cervical mucus 14 days after onset of illness when it was no longer detected in blood or urine. It has also been isolated in saliva and tears for up to 1 month after symptom onset. And now coming to the clinical aspect, this is from the initial report from the Yap Island outbreak. The most the conspicuous aspect is the presence of a pruritic maculopapular rash, which is present in around 90% of individuals. Very, very important. Fever. Fever is not a high-grade fever. That is how you can sort of distinguish between, say, dengue fever and chikungunya fever. Whereas, the fever is going to be very high-grade, whereas in Zika it is going to be a low-grade fever. Usually, it won't be more than 38.5. Then the presence of arthralgia in 65%, presence of non-purulent conjunctivitis in 55%, myalgia in 48%, headache in 45%, retroorbital pain just like in dengue in 39%. We may have this edema as well as vomiting also. But there is another study from NIV, that is from Dr. Pragya Yadav's group, where the presence of rash I believe that it is based on the data which has been fed in the PCR forms from Rajasthan and all. So rash was present only in around 60% and fever was present in 40%. But in a majority of the cases where we suspect Zika is going to be in those with rash. Okay, so but the thing is that 80% will be asymptomatic. And how to differentiate between Zika, dengue, chikungunya, and I think we should be discussing about COVID also. So fever, the high-grade fever is there in dengue as well as chikungunya, whereas the fever in Zika is a low-grade fever. Now the presence of rash. In Zika, it is a maculopapular rash which begins in the face and extends to the extremities, and the palms and soles are also involved in the rash in Zika. But just like in chikungunya, the rash is a pruritic rash. Based on the onset, you can say that in Zika, the rash will be there from day 1 onwards. Whereas in chikungunya, usually you are going to see the rash by around 3rd day. And dengue fever, you have the febrile rash as well as the convalescent rash. Febrile rash usually starts by around, say, 3rd day or so. And the convalescent rash usually starts after effervescence. So if you are having a low-grade fever with rash from the day 1 onwards, you think about Zika virus infection. Now coming to the presence of conjunctivitis, usually in chikungunya also in around, say, 30% you can have conjunctivitis. Whereas in Zika, the conjunctivitis is there. It is a non-purulent conjunctivitis. And presence of arthralgia also helps in differentiating Zika from chikungunya. You know the severity of the arthralgia in chikungunya, whereas in Zika, we are going to have arthralgia involving the small joints of the hand as well as the feet. Whereas in chikungunya, the lower back as well as the knee joints and all joints will be symmetrically involved. Dengue also you can have arthralgia. These are the cardinal 4 symptoms. There is a fever, the pruritic maculopapular rash, the non-purulent conjunctivitis, and arthralgia. So the definition will be, so for surveillance you need to have a definition. Any patient with acute febrile illness, and if there is a presence of 2 or more of the first 4 symptoms, presence of fever, rash, conjunctivitis or arthralgia, for surveillance purpose, think in terms of sending for the Zika PCR if the patient presents to you within 7 days of symptom onset, and if you are having, say, abundant supply of these PCR kits. So if you are not having an abundant supply of PCR kits, we need to focus on that category where Zika is going to be a problem, that is the pregnant ladies. Okay, then limit the surveillance to that group. Then myalgia is more seen in dengue as well as chikungunya, the presence of headache, presence of hemorrhage. If hemorrhage is there, it is not Zika. And the presence of shock also is not Zika. And now coming to the presence of lymphadenopathy and hepatomegaly. Hepatomegaly is usually seen in chikungunya, and lymphadenopathy, even though it can be seen in Zika, dengue as well as chikungunya, usually it is seen in generalized lymphadenopathy, may be seen in all these 3 viral infections. So these are the features of Zika. You can see the non-purulent conjunctivitis. You can see the maculopapular pruritic rash. You can see the small joints of hands as well as the feet showing arthralgia and the presence of the edema as well. So these are the classical 4 symptoms of Zika virus infection. And if you are looking at this thing on the left side, you are seeing the classical leptospirosis eye. You are seeing the conjunctival congestion as well as jaundice. And the right side, you are seeing the sick eye. You are seeing the non-purulent conjunctivitis with a rash. Okay. So non-purulent conjunctivitis with fever, arthralgia should make you think in terms of Zika virus infection. This is the rash in dengue. We are having the febrile rash as well as the febrile rash during that period, if you are putting a stethoscope or you are putting your palm, you can see the impression sign, and you can see that the white islands of white in a sea of red. That is the convalescent rash of dengue. And if you are seeing this, the bleeding spots, then it is not Zika, and you should think about dengue virus infection. And some of the rare features, one is along with this non-purulent conjunctivitis, if the patient is complaining of blurring of vision, you need to take the opinion of an ophthalmologist, because uveitis has also been described in Zika virus infection. This was published in NEJM. And now this is data from Brazil. You can see that 80% will be asymptomatic, 20% will be symptomatic. In this group, so Guillain-Barré syndrome, the prevalence of Guillain-Barré syndrome post Zika virus infection, it can occur following asymptomatic infection as well, is around say 2.4 per 10,000 people who are getting infected. And then Guillain-Barré syndrome, so the death in GBS following this thing is around say 3 to 10%. Okay, and now with regard to the vertical transmission, so the symptomatic mother as well as asymptomatic mother can transmit it to the fetus. And the microcephaly, the prevalence in the Brazilian studies are actually very high, because I have been talking with the pediatrician in the Brazil. The cutoff for the microcephaly was a bit different from the studies in USA. And the Brazilian studies, if you look at the Brazilian studies, the prevalence of microcephaly, if you are getting infected in the first trimester, is actually as high as 50%. And second is around 45, and third trimester is around 29%. But those figures are does not go in tune with studies from other parts of world, including USA. So as per US data, if you are getting infected in the first trimester, and the chance of getting microcephaly is around say 8 to 9%. The second trimester is around say 4%, and third trimester is also around 4%. So it's microcephaly is not the only problem. You can have all sorts of other birth anomalies as well. If you include that also, the maximum chance of malformations if you're getting infected in first trimester is around 12%. But this is data from Brazil as well as USA. So in Singapore, they had around 455 patients, but none of the pregnant ladies, the microcephaly or hydrocephalus was not microcephaly, or so GBS has not been reported from outbreaks in India or from the Southeast Asian countries, except from Thailand and Vietnam, where 3 cases of microcephaly were reported. So the neurological complication, we know that the first report of GBS and association with GBS was from French Polynesia, and usually they used to have around say 2 to 3 cases per year. But following the Zika outbreak, they thought that it was the dengue outbreak which was going on in Yape Island also in 2007. And then when they sent a sample to CDC, they confirmed it as Zika. During Yap Island, so the reports of microcephaly and Guillain-Barré syndrome were not there. But during the outbreak in Polynesia, French Polynesia in 2013-14, they had 42 cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome. So that is compared to their background rate of 3 cases per year, there was a 20% increase in Guillain-Barré syndrome. And at that time, they postulated the physiopathological mechanisms were genetic evolution of the virus to a more pathogenic genotype. Definitely, that was proven later because of the acquisition of mutations like S139N. And susceptibility in the Polynesian population, that assumption was proved wrong when Guillain-Barré syndrome got reported from Brazil as well. And then sequential arboviral immune stimulation, that is in Pacific Islands also they were having Zika and dengue infection, so co-circulating. So sequential arboviral immune stimulation, which was not yet been proven. If it is proven, then we are in for a bit of a trouble due to co-circulation of all 3. And then the features, the prevalence of GBS was 2.4 cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome for 10,000 Zika viral infection. And the Guillain-Barré type was acute motor axonal neuropathy. This Aman type was the one which was detected. And the most interesting aspect was the recovery was faster compared to the GBS following, say, other infections. The AIDP following Zika virus infection, the recovery was a bit faster. The time between reported viral syndrome and onset of neurological symptoms was 6 days. Okay, during today's discussion, the neurologist did say that so we should have a surveillance for Guillain-Barré syndrome as well as transverse myelitis. But the problem is that at that time, if you are sending the PCR of the patient, it is going to be negative only. So only way in which we can say whether it is related to Zika or something is to send the sample to NIV to to look for IgM, and if the IgM is positive, to do for the print assay. That is a plaque reduction neutralization test. This is the epidemic curve in the French Polynesia. For 10,000 cases, 2.4 cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome were noted. In Southeast Asia, India, till now, no, we were not able to find an association between GBS and Zika virus. No, because during GBS, if you are sending a PCR and saying that PCR is negative, you may not be able to find any association, because the association was found in the French Polynesian Islands through Zika IgM testing and followed by the print assay. This is the data from Brazil, which also said that the incidence of GBS was 9 to 19 times higher than expected during the outbreak period. And the other features of neuroinflammation which can occur are the presence of acute myelitis, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, then myeloradicolitis, you can say optic neuritis, or almost all sorts of neurological problems due to neuroinflammation can occur following Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's basically an immune trigger. So these are the broad differentials: dengue, chikungunya, the leptospira, malaria, rickettsia. So we can see that almost all the differential diagnosis we are having in Kerala as well. So we need to have a very good lab-based approach also to rule out all these differential diagnosis. And you should also add corona also to this list of differentials. This coronavirus also can present with fever, can present with conjunctivitis, especially the Delta variant. You can also have this rash as well as polyarthralgia. And this is, you can see the period of viremia. It can be from say 2 days to 7 days, and you can take it as the period of infectivity. And that is why we say that the PCR should be sent between 7 days, before 7 days of symptom onset, and then can persist in urine for a longer period of time, and 7 also, and for a bit more longer period of time. And usually the antibodies, the Zika IgM and the IgG starts developing, say maybe after a second week or so. And the important thing is that this IgM can persist for a long period of time. So many people did ask why you're doing the Zika IgM followed by print assay. Why can't you do a Zika IgG followed by a print assay? The thing is that the IgM can also persist for up to a year or so. That is why majority of the guidelines do IgM followed by print assay and not IgG followed by print assay. Now our scenario, that is what are the kits that we are having. Zika PCR, we are having the trioplex as well as the monoplex kit. Trioplex kit means it's available in Trivandrum Medical College VRDL lab. So we can simultaneously check for dengue PCR, chikungunya PCR as well as Zika PCR. Monoplex means you are doing only the Zika PCR from the serum. The samples which can be tested using the trioplex PCR are the serum, urine, amniotic fluid, plasma and CSF. As of now, then the NIV has given sanction only for testing the serum PCR, but then discussion with Dr. Pragya madam, which was done by Sharada madam, is said that if you're suspicious, you can also do the trioplex kit. It has been validated in urine, amniotic fluid, plasma and CSF, whereas the monoplex kit it should be done only in serum. And then if you want, in case of say a pregnancy, suppose a pregnant lady is coming and saying that around say 2 months back I had this fever with rash and conjunctivitis, could it be Zika? Then there is no point in doing the PCR. You can do the Zika IgM, but then it has to be sent to Pune. And if it is positive, the problem is that there could be cross reaction with dengue as well as chikungunya. They will do the plague reduction neutralization test. So usually sample less than 7 days to do the serum PCR. And if you do get approval for doing urine PCR here, so for more than 7 days up to 20 days, you can think about urine PCR as well. So this is from the CDC guidelines. I said that the beauty of Zika is that it got into USA as well. So we have very good algorithms of how to have these diagnostic testing platforms in an area where a dengue and Zika virus infection are co-circulating in symptomatic pregnant women with risk of infection with both viruses. That is the situation, I think, in Kerala now. Then the collected specimen should be subjected to both the PCRs for dengue as well as Zika, and then you should do the dengue and Zika IgM also. If it is positive for a dengue PCR, it is acute dengue virus infection. If it is positive for Zika virus PCR, it is acute Zika virus infection. Suppose both the PCRs are negative. Okay. And then if it is positive for either dengue IgM or Zika virus IgM, then you need to do the PRND test. PRND test as of now can be done only in NIV Pune. But as part of WHO dengue study, Rajiv Gandhi, Dr. Srikumar sir had done this the PRND for dengue, So if a Zika strain is obtained, I believe that IgG may be able to perform print assay as well. The print, if the more than 10 plaques are there for dengue, take it as dengue infection. And if the Zika plaques are less than 10, it is dengue infection. Suppose it is more than 10 for Zika and less than 10 for dengue, take it as Zika virus infection. So basically, we do have all very good guidelines or recommendations from CDC. Only thing is the lack of access to kits and IgM and print assay. Another important aspect is that majority of the guidelines speak about travel is going to be a dengue endemic region. But our situation is that we are in an endemic situation. So in Trivandrum, 30% of fever with rash is positive. Means there are a lot of cases are going to be diagnosed if you are having access to the PCR kits. And we should be concerned only about pregnancy. For all other people, even in the pediatric population, the symptomatology is not very different from that of adults. We need not be that much bothered. The complication, myocarditis, and all those things are extremely rare. Okay, but we should be concerned about pregnant ladies. Okay, suppose those mutations are not identified by NIV, we need not be bothered about pregnancy also. But what does CDC say about a pregnant lady living in an area with a risk of ongoing transmission? So that is, for example, Trivandrum, any pregnant lady can get infected at any point of time. They recommend testing. Symptomatic means definitely you have to test. If they are asymptomatic also, you have to test 3 times during pregnancy. First, during the prenatal care. So that is actually CDC guidelines. These guidelines are, there are no Indian guidelines like this. So this is to pick up, Zika virus infection pregnancy. Since we don't have that much risk of hydrocephalus, microcephaly as of now, we need not follow this. But the most important aspect is the only way in which you can pick asymptomatic infection in pregnancy in a person who is living in an endemic region is to do tests during 3 time points during pregnancy, even when they are asymptomatic. So this is the major problem with regard to Zika virus infection. So if this association with microcephaly has not been found in during the Brazil outbreak, or say the association with GBS was also not found, it could be just like another mild fever with a rash situation. Okay, so we need not be bothered that much about that. But the problem is that the chance of microcephaly is definitely there. Okay. And a few words on Zika and pregnancy. We can have the vertical transmission. The risk of this microcephaly, etc., are more when the fetus is getting infected during the first trimester, up to say maybe around 20 to 24 weeks. You can have that. During second trimester also, the risk of the microcephaly is around say 4 to 5%. You can also have this intrapartum transmission. This can lead to microcephaly. You can see calcification, ocular defects, sensory neural hearing loss, IUGR, fetal loss, etc. So the calcification you can see in say congenital rubella syndrome, toxoplasmosis, and all those things. But there is a unique aspect to calcification which is occurring in the Zika syndrome in fetus. That is usually it occurs as sort of a line-like thing in the junction of the cortical and the subcortical white matter. It's very important. So CDC does not recommend Zika virus testing for everyone. Pregnant newborn without symptoms should be tested if they have traveled to an area with Zika or live in an area with Zika. So we will fall into the second category. That is a person who is living in an area with Zika. So they say that such persons, even without symptoms, should be tested at 3 time points. Pregnant women without symptoms should be tested if they have had sex without a condom with a man confirmed to have Zika virus infection. And this is actually the testing algorithm for a pregnant woman with possible exposure to Zika virus not residing in an area with active Zika virus transmission. There is a pregnant woman with possible exposure to Zika virus, test for Zika virus infection. If it is positive or inconclusive, consider serial fetal ultrasound, very important, to look for the birth malformations. If it is negative for Zika virus infection also, since the patient did have a possible exposure to Zika virus, you have to do serial fetal ultrasound examination. And if fetal ultrasound picks up some abnormalities, you have to do the test again. And this is the algorithm for a pregnant woman residing in an area with active Zika virus transmission with or without clinical illness consistent with Zika virus disease. That is a patient who is residing in an endemic area. So pregnant woman in an area with local Zika virus transmission. So if the pregnant woman is symptomatic, definitely follow that algorithm. Okay. If the patient is symptomatic and is negative for Zika virus infection also, probably you need to follow up the patient with fetal ultrasound. It's very, very important. Okay. Now, this is the clinical management of proven or possible Zika during pregnancy, the antibiotic period. That is the most important thing, and that is why we need to have guidelines from the radio diagnosis people as well. How frequently we should be doing this serial ultrasound? The CDC recommends ultrasound for possible or a proven Zika during pregnancy. Ultrasound should be done every 3 to 4 weeks. Very important. And if the baby is born, histopathological examination of placenta and umbilical cord, testing for frozen placental tissue and cord tissue for Zika virus RNA, testing of cord serum for Zika and dengue virus IgM, and neutralizing antibodies. So these are the things that we should be expecting in infant who is born to a mother with Zika infection with a possible or a confirmed Zika, microcephaly, miscarriage, stillbirth, absent or poorly developed brain structures, defects of the eye, hearing deficits, and impaired growth. And we can also have we can also have some cardiac malformations as well. And these are unique features because we have been having, say, congenital rubella syndrome, we have been having congenital CME syndrome, congenital toxoplasmosis, etc. And there are certain features which are unique to this congenital Zika syndrome. That is the presence of severe microcephaly with a partially collapsed skull, thin cerebral cortex with subcortical calcification. Usually in other situations you are going to have punctate calcification. Okay, macular scarring and focal pigmentary retinal mottling, and that is the reason why you need to have ophthalmology consult for all such babies after delivery and at periodic time points. Congenital contractures or arthrogryposis, which is actually sort of pathognomonic for congenital Zika syndrome, and marked early hypertonia. And neonatal evaluation, so we need to have guidelines for how to follow up these kids. So it is not only about measuring the head circumference and assessment of gestational age. We need to have neurological evaluation to identify neurological abnormalities, dysmorphic features, enlarged liver or spleen, rash, and other skin lesions, cranial ultrasound, ophthalmology evaluation before hospital discharge or within 1 month after birth. Then we need to rule out sensory neural hearing loss, etc. And that is at the time of delivery, and at 6 months of age also you need to have a repeat audiology. If sensory neural hearing loss was present initially, you need to have periodic follow-up. Then continued evaluation of developmental characteristics and milestones, and definitely you need to have an array of specialists to take care of these sort of babies. Then this is the definition of microcephaly, etc. I'm not going into details of this. Head circumference at birth is less than 3rd percentile for gestational age and sex. And then how to measure this microcephaly, all these things will be done by the pediatricians or the neonatologists. But we should be aware of this. Any patient with any sort of malformations who are going to be born, we need to keep in mind the possibility of the congenital Zika syndrome as well. And then this is the most important thing, the sexual transmission. Okay, so we know that in 7 it may be there up to 6 months, but then the infectivity up to 6 months is not yet proven. So the guidelines, CDC guidelines say that men, whether symptomatic or not, should wait at least 3 months after symptom onset if symptomatic, or last possible Zika virus exposure if asymptomatic, before unprotected sex. Herein lies a problem. So a person living in Trivandrum as of now, what will be the second part? That is, if the patient is asymptomatic, what is the last possible Zika virus exposure? We don't know. That is the issue. Okay, so you need to wait for 3 months before you can have unprotected sex. For us females, as per CDC, you need to wait only for 2 months to have unprotected sex. Whereas the WHO definition differs from CDC in that WHO says that men and women outside areas of Zika transmission who have traveled to areas with active transmission should wait at least for 6 months following the return before unprotected sex, regardless of symptoms. WHO indicates that this is a conservative recommendation based in part on the limited data on the duration and infectivity of Zika virus in 7 following initial infection. So CDC says 3 months for men and 2 months for females, and WHO says 6 months, but it is not for people in endemic area. It is actually for people who have visited an area with ongoing Zika transmission. Now, regarding treatment, as such, just supportive measures are needed. It is just like a mild, say, dengue or a mild chikungunya. So you just need paracetamol and very good hydration. But then this sofosbuvir has been tried. There are trials with sofosbuvir, which is a nucleotide analog, NS5B nucleotide analog inhibitor, which has been used for hepatitis C. So this has been tried in animal models, and cell culture studies have established that sofosbuvir efficiently inhibits replication and infection of several Zika strains in multiple human tumor cell lines and isolated human fetal derived neuronal stem cells. So we are not we need not treat any patient with Zika virus infection if don't belong to the higher risk category, it's a pregnancy or post transplantation. And sofosbuvir can be safely used in pregnancy. Also, the niclosamide, another drug, and the parasitic drug, has been repositioned. So studies were done using sofosbuvir and niclosamide because these two drugs pose no danger to pregnant women. Okay, so this has been done in clinical trials, but there are no recommendation to use any of these drugs because only the studies, that is the preclinical studies, have been done with these two drugs. As of now, we have only supportive treatment for Zika virus infection. And regarding vaccines, I think suppose there is a huge outbreak of Zika virus infection in North America now, I believe that we'll get this mRNA vaccine against Zika virus within say 6 months or so. But as of now, there are two vaccines in the phase 1 trial. One is the inactivated vaccine, and second is AD26. That is an adenoviral vector vaccine. Sputnik is also an AD26 vaccine. So we have two vaccines in phase 1 trial, and in the phase 1 trial, the immunogenicity was around 80%. Regarding what should be our guidelines with regard to transfusion and transplantation, today we had a discussion, but the issue is that we are in an endemic area. So the WHO guidelines, etc., specify that if you want to an area where there is an ongoing transmission, then there is a transfusion as well as transplantation guidelines, not specifically for people in endemic region. But then after our discussion, we found that even if you are going to get Zika through transfusion, its impact will be there only if a pregnant lady is getting a transfusion, and pregnant lady getting transfusion during the first or second trimester. So usually in pregnancy related transfusion requirements are with relation to the postpartum hemorrhage and all those things, which happens in third trimester, which should not be a concern for us. But suppose a pregnant lady requires a transfusion in the first or second trimester, especially in the first trimester. So it's not going to be an emergency. It's going to be a planned transfusion only. In such situations, probably screening for blood makes some sense. Okay, we can't screen all the blood samples, etc., because we don't have that much of kids. But suppose a pregnant lady in the first or second trimester, or a patient is going to undergone transplantation recently, is requiring blood transfusion. Probably in such situation, we can think about screening the blood. We don't have any Indian guidelines to this effect. So thank you very much. So everything. So our the risk communication to the people, everything depends on one thing, that is the sequencing result from NIV. Suppose it is not showing any mutations which might increase the neurovirulence or transmission, or any mutations which the Brazil variant had, then we are in a safe zone. It could be just like any other fever thrush. Suppose these two mutations are there, probably we need to have guidelines addressing all these aspects. That is the radiology, that is how frequently we need to do this fetal ultrasound, neonatology, what to be done, transfusion guidelines, transplantation guidelines, etc. So thank you very much for this opportunity. The people with Zika may not be that much sick. Presentation may not be that much sick. Anyway, patient with fever, rash, and arthritis, we need to do this triplex PCR to rule out Zika virus infection. So it is one of the DDs, Kawasaki. Yeah.
How long does it take for GBS to set in after Zika infection is another question.
Yeah, from the study in the French Polynesia, it is after 6 days usually. In the study which was done on 42 patients, the mean duration was 6 days after symptom onset. And one question was related to lab findings. Lab findings means which is just like any other viral fever. Total count will be low, and there will be a slight lymphocytosis and probably a small transaminitis only. We can't draw any inference from that because dengue as well as chikungunya may be having the same picture.
Can a person get infected with dengue and Zika simultaneously? That you have answered.
Definitely. You can have all three together. Don't worry.
Okay. And then anemia is the recurring transfusion in pregnancy?
Anemia requiring transfusion in pregnancy, usually it will be in the third trimester, that is postpartum hemorrhage and all those things. Then I don't think screening is any cost effective. But suppose in the first or second trimester you require transfusion, probably screening will be good. But adinapatti guidelines onnu illa ട്ടോ. I think we asked the Blood Transfusion Society of Kerala to take it up. Central level in adine prathichu guidelines onnu illa. So first trimester patient receiving blood transfusion.
In third trimester, is there risk of preterm labor and fetal mortality?
Definitely. IUGR-ഉം preterm labor-ഉം എല്ലാം തന്നെ ഡിസ്ക്രൈബ്ഡ് ആണ്. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് അങ്ങനെയുള്ള മീൻസ് ഉള്ളെങ്കിലും ഹെഡ് സർക്കംഫറൻസ് നോക്കണമെന്നൊക്കെ പറയുന്നത്. ഓക്കെ, അതായത് നമ്മളെ ഈ ഡെത്തായ കുട്ടിയുടെയും ഹെഡ് സർക്കംഫറൻസ് ഒക്കെ നോക്കി മൈക്രോസെഫാലി ഉണ്ടോ എന്നൊക്കെ നോക്കിയിട്ട് റെട്രോസ്പെക്റ്റീവ്ലി പ്രോബ്ലി യു ഹാവ് ടു സീ വെദർ സിക്ക വാസ് ഇൻവോൾവ്ഡ് ഓർ നോട്ട്.
What if both dengue and Zika comes as positive? Since it is said there is cross-reactivity, should we go with clinical findings?
There are two ways. One is to go with clinical features. Second is we need not be that much bothered if the patient is not pregnant. Pregnant aanu, you are having say a Zika IgM as well as dengue IgM positive. The next is to go for the PRNT. PRNT il thanne you can have plaques against Zika as well as dengue. If there are more than 10 plaques against dengue, then it is dengue. It is more than 10 plaques against Zika, it is Zika.
Is there any behavioral modification needed for in population?
അത് ആക്ച്വലി ചോദിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത് with regard to the sexual practices ആണ്. It's a very difficult question to answer. കാരണം ഇപ്പം suppose we are having an outbreak in it would have been very easy for us to set the guidelines saying that any person who has returned from Tamil you should not practice unprotected sex if it is a male for 3 months and female for 2 months according to CDC and 6 months according to WHO എന്ന് പറയാറ്. Since we are in an endemic location, what to advise is a major problem. Next thing is, when should you plan pregnancy? That also I don't know the real answers. I think in 1 or 2 weeks we can have very good guidelines on these things. ഒരു ഇമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റി ഉണ്ട്. ഇതുവരെ റീഇൻഫെക്ഷൻ ജനാർദ്ദൻ നായിക് സാറ് ഇമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റിയെ പറ്റി ചോദിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ബട്ട് ഗുഡ് തിങ് ഈസ് ദാറ്റ് ഇതുവരെ റീഇൻഫെക്ഷൻ ഡിസ്ക്രൈബ്ഡ് അല്ല. ഓക്കെ
സാർ, കേരളത്തിലുള്ള എല്ലാ മൈക്രോസെഫാലിയും അതുപോലെ GBS-ഉം സ്ക്രീൻ ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടോ സാർ ഇതേവരെ?
ആക്ച്വലി സാർ ICMR-ന്റെ ഒരു പ്രോജക്റ്റ് ഉള്ളതാണ് സാർ 2 വർഷമായിട്ട് എല്ലാ പീഡിയാട്രിക്സിലും മൈക്രോസെഫാലി നോക്കണമെന്നുള്ളത്. സാർ അതിന് ഒരു ചെറിയൊരു പ്രോബ്ലം ഉണ്ട്. കാരണം നമുക്ക് അവൈലബിൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഏക ടെസ്റ്റ് PCR ആണെങ്കിലേ we are not expecting PCR to be positive. We want IgM followed by print assay. അത് ചെയ്യാൻ നമുക്ക് പറയാൻ പറ്റത്തില്ല. കാരണം ഈ GBS ആയിട്ട് അസോസിയേഷൻ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എനിവേ മറ്റേ ഈ ഫ്രഞ്ച് പോളിനേഷ്യയിൽ ആഫ്റ്റർ 6 days ആണെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാലും യൂഷ്വലി ഇറ്റ് സിൻസ് ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് എൻ ഇമ്മ്യൂണോളജിക്കൽ തിങ് വി ആർ എക്സ്പെക്ടിങ് ആഫ്റ്റർ സേ 2 weeks or so എന്ന് എടുക്കുക GBS. By that time the PCR will be negative. So we need to do the IgM and the print assay. എന്നാൽ മാത്രമേ അസോസിയേഷൻ പറയാൻ പറ്റൂ. പക്ഷേ സാറേ ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ട് റേറ്റ് ഉണ്ടല്ലോ, ഈ ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ട് റേറ്റിനെ കാട്ടി കൂടുതലാണ് നോക്കിയാൽ മതി എല്ലാ സെന്റേഴ്സിലെ GBS ഒക്കെ. സോ ദർ വിൽ ബി എ ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ട് റേറ്റ് ഫോർ GBS. ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ ഇഷ്യൂ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഫോളോയിങ് കോവിഡ് ഓൾസോ യു ക്യാൻ ഹാവ് GBS ആൻഡ് ഓൾ ദിസ് ന്യൂറോളജിക്കൽ ദിസ് തിങ്. അപ്പൊ GBS കൂടിയാൽ പോലും സിക്കാണെന്ന് ഇപ്പം പറയാൻ പറ്റില്ല. യു ആർ ഹാവിംഗ് കോവിഡ് ഓൾസോ. എനിവേ ഫോർ ഓൾ ദ GBS പേഷ്യൻസ് ടുഡേ ന്യൂറോളജിസ്റ്റ് റിക്വസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്ത് തന്നെ we should permit them to do Zika IgM to send the sample to NIV for Zika IgM, and if it is positive they will do the PRNT test and all that.
As an ophthalmologist, I have seen so many microcephaly and GBS കണ്ടായിരുന്നു സാർ. സാർ, പക്ഷേ ഇതൊരു പുതിയ അറിവാണ്. ഇപ്പോഴാണ് അറിയുന്നത് ഇങ്ങനെ സിക്കാൻ പോവാം.
സാറേ അതിനെപ്പറ്റി ഒരു പ്രോബ്ലം എന്ന് വെച്ചാല് നമുക്കൊരു ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ട് റേറ്റ് ഓഫ് മൈക്രോസെഫാലി ഉണ്ടല്ലോ എല്ലാ കൺട്രീസിലും. വൺ മൈക്രോസെഫാലി ഡസ് നോട്ട് മീൻ ദാറ്റ് ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് റിലേറ്റഡ് ടു ദിസ് തിങ്. ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ തായ്ലാന്റിനും വിയറ്റ്നാമിൽ നിന്നും 3 കേസിന് മൈക്രോസെഫാലി ഉണ്ടെന്ന് പറയുന്നതിന്റെ ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻസ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാല് അവിടെയും ഉള്ളത് ഇന്ത്യയിലും സിംഗപ്പൂരിലുള്ള സ്ട്രെയിൻ തന്നെയായിരുന്നു. ബട്ട് അവർക്ക് മൈക്രോസെഫാലി വന്നു. അതുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മൾ ഇതിനെ അത്ര തള്ളിക്കളയാൻ പാടില്ല എന്നൊരു ഇത് പറയുമ്പോഴുള്ള ഇഷ്യൂ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അവിടെ 3 കേസേ ഉള്ളൂ. 3 കേസ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ആ കൺട്രിയുടെ ബാക്ക്ഗ്രൗണ്ട് റേറ്റ് ആയിരിക്കാം, അതിന് സിക്ക ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നേ ഉള്ളൂ. അപ്പൊ വി നീഡ് ടു ഹാവ് എ വെരി ഗുഡ് സർവൈലൻസ് പ്രോഗ്രാം. അല്ലാതെ ആസ് ഓഫ് നൗ ദ സ്ട്രെയിൻസ് ഇൻ സൗത്ത് ഈസ്റ്റ് ഏഷ്യ ആൻഡ് ഇന്ത്യ അതില് ഈ 2 മ്യൂട്ടേഷൻസ് ഇല്ല, വിച്ച് ഈസ് there in the Brazil variant, which leads to increase in neurovirulence. Okay, അപ്പൊ ഈ സീക്വൻസിംഗിൽ ഇത് ഉണ്ടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാല് നമുക്ക് ഇതെല്ലാം പ്രോപ്പർലി ഫോളോ അപ്പ് ചെയ്യേണ്ടി വരും.
ഈ ഹസ്ബൻഡ്സ് ഓഫ് pregnant ladies, if they come with this problem, അവരെ ഈ സർവൈലൻസിനകത്ത് ഇൻക്ലൂഡ് ചെയ്യണം?
പ്രഗ്നന്റ് ലേഡി പോസിറ്റീവ് ആണ്, ഹസ്ബൻഡ് ഇൻക്ലൂഡ് ചെയ്യണം.
പ്രഗ്നന്റ് ലേഡി വന്നിട്ടില്ല നമ്മുടെ അടുത്ത്, പക്ഷെ ഹസ്ബൻഡ് വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആൻഡ് ഓൺ എൻക്വയറിംഗ് വി അണ്ടർസ്റ്റുഡ് ദാറ്റ് ദ വൈഫ് ഇസ് പ്രഗ്നന്റ്. But this guy has got fever with rash and conjunctivitis.
Ideally, we should include the wife also, sir.
Wife also. And what about this particular person? ഈ particular personന്റെ നമ്മളിപ്പോ സർവൈലൻസിൽ ഇപ്പം പറഞ്ഞേക്കുന്ന അനുസരിച്ച് വൈഫിന് പ്രഗ്നന്റ് ലേഡീസ് മാത്രമല്ലേ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ളൂ?
അല്ല, അത് ആക്ച്വലി ലക്ഷ്മി പറഞ്ഞായിരുന്നു സാർ. ഇപ്പൊ ലക്ഷ്മിയുടെ ഒരു പ്രസന്റേഷനിൽ വീട്ടിലൊരു പ്രഗ്നന്റ് ലേഡി ആവുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ദാറ്റ് പേഷ്യന്റ് ഓൾസോ ബിക്കം എ പ്രയോറിറ്റി സാമ്പിൾ.
ഓക്കെ,
നമ്മൾ ART ചെയ്യുവാണെങ്കിൽ, ആർട്ടിഫിഷ്യൽ റീപ്രൊഡക്റ്റീവ് ടെക്നിക്ക് ചെയ്യുവാണെങ്കിൽ, we take the semen അതൊരു എങ്ങനെയാ അതിന്റെ ഒരു ഇതെങ്ങനെയാ?
ഇതിന് CDC ഗൈഡ് ലൈൻസ് ഉണ്ട്. അതാ ഞാൻ ആക്ച്വലി പറഞ്ഞു വേണം, ഇത് കുറച്ചൊരു കോംപ്ലിക്കേറ്റഡ് ഏരിയ ആണ്. വെച്ചാൽ നമ്മള് അത്ര സിമ്പിൾ അല്ല സംഭവം സിക്ക. അതിൽ ഒരു പോയിന്റ് പറയാം, നമ്മൾ യൂഷ്വലി സെമൻ വാഷ് ചെയ്യുമല്ലോ പല പ്രൊസീജിയേഴ്സ്. സെമൻ വാഷ് ചെയ്താൽ ഈ വൈറസ് പോകത്തില്ല. കാരണം ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് ആക്ച്വലി ഇൻകോപ്പറേറ്റഡ് ഇൻ ടു ദ സ്പെർമറ്റോസോ പോലെയാണ്. ജസ്റ്റ് ബൈ വാഷിംഗ് ഇറ്റ് വോണ്ട് ഗോ. സോ ദർ ആർ ഇംപ്ലിക്കേഷൻസ് എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ മീൻസ് വേണം, അതാണ് ഈ നമ്മുടെ ആ സീക്വൻസ് വരട്ടെ വേണം. ആ സീക്വൻസിൽ പ്രശ്നമുള്ള സീക്വൻസ് ആണെങ്കിൽ then probably we may have to have a relook at all the procedures for the time being.
It's a costly affair അല്ലേ? IRT ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ തന്നെ around 2 lakhs പേഷ്യന്റ് ആവുന്നുണ്ട്.
Exactly madam. അതാണ്. അപ്പൊ ഒരു ഔട്ട്ബ്രേക്ക് നടക്കുമ്പോൾ we can probably differ. Okay. And it is not going to continue. If you look at the Yap Island or Polynesia or Brazil, it lasted for only a particular period. You are not having reinfections and all. അപ്പോൾ ഒരു കോസ്റ്റ്ലി അഫയർ ലൈക്ക് സേ അസിസ്റ്റഡ് റീപ്രൊഡക്ഷൻ പ്രോബ്ലി ക്യാൻ വെയിറ്റ് ഫോർ സം പീരിയഡ് ഓഫ് ടൈം.
ഓക്കെ, താങ്ക് യു
സാർ. ഒരു ഡൗട്ട് ഇവിടെ, ഈ ഫ്രഞ്ച് പോളിനേഷ്യയിലും യാപ്പ് ഐലൻഡിലും സാർ ഇപ്പം പറഞ്ഞു 2 months ഒക്കെ കഴിഞ്ഞപ്പോഴത്തേക്ക് അതങ്ങ് പോയെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. അപ്പം വാസ് ഇറ്റ് ബിക്കോസ് ഓഫ് ആക്റ്റീവ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സർവൈലൻസും ആക്റ്റീവ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സോഴ്സ് റിഡക്ഷൻ കൊണ്ടാണോ അത് പോയത്, അതോ സം അതർ റീസൺ?
സാർ ഞാൻ 2 months എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞില്ല. അവിടെ 2007 എക്സാക്ട് ടൈം എനിക്കറിയില്ല. 2007 യാപ്പും 2013-14 ഫ്രഞ്ച് പോളിനേഷ്യ. അവിടെ ഈ ഒരിടത്ത് 73% സീറോ പ്രിവലൻസും മറ്റിടത്ത് 66% ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അപ്പോഴത് വൈറസ് എല്ലാവരും ഇൻഫെക്ട് ചെയ്തങ്ങ് പോയതാണ്.
ഓക്കെ സാർ. അപ്പം അതിന്റെ ആ ഒരു ഇതങ്ങ് കഴിഞ്ഞു പോയി പ്രിവലൻസ് കാരണമാണ്, അല്ലാതെ
സാറേ അത്രത്തോളം 73% സീറോ പ്രിവലൻസ് ഒരിടത്ത് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിലേ അതെല്ലാവരും ഇൻഫെക്റ്റഡ് ആയതുകൊണ്ട് പോയെന്നല്ലേ പറയാൻ പറ്റും. ഇപ്പൊ നമ്മളിപ്പം കോവിഡിനെ പറ്റി പറയുന്ന പോലെ, എസ്പെഷ്യലി ഇൻ എ ഡിസീസ് വിത്ത് നോ റീഇൻഫെക്ഷൻ ലൈക്ക് ആസ് ഓഫ് നൗ ലൈക്ക് സിക്ക, പ്രോബബ്ലി ദേ ഗോട്ട് ദിസ് ഹേർഡ് ഇമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റി ലൈക്ക് ദി വെൻ 73% ഗോട്ട് ഇൻഫെക്റ്റഡ്. യാപ്പിൽ ഒരു പ്രശ്നം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു, അവർക്ക് അറിയില്ലായിരുന്നു ഇത് സിക്ക ആണെന്ന്. ദേ തോട്ട് ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് ഡെങ്കി. എന്നിട്ട് അവിടെ ക്ലിനിക്കലി സർട്ടൻ ആസ്പെക്ട്സ് വേർ നോട്ട് ഫിറ്റിംഗ് ഇറ്റ് വിത്ത് ഡെങ്കി. അങ്ങനെയാണ് ദേ സെൻഡ് എ സാമ്പിൾ ടു CDC ആൻഡ് ദേ ഡയഗ്നോസ്ഡ് ആസ് സിക്ക. They did not get, probably sir, the one good thing about Zika is that now we have started all this surveillance and then mosquito nets and everything is there, no? അതുകൊണ്ട് നമ്മൾ ഈ ഡെങ്കിന്റെയും ചിക്കൻ ഗുനിയുടെ ഇമ്പാക്റ്റും കൂടെ കുറയാൻ ഒരു ചാൻസ് ഉണ്ട്.
അരവിന്ദ് സാർ, നമ്മൾ ഈ റീഇൻഫെക്ഷന് സാധ്യത ഇല്ല
സാറേ ആസ് ഓഫ് നൗ ഉള്ള എവിഡൻസ് വെച്ചാണ് പറയുന്നത് സാറേ. സാറേ ക്ലിയർ ആയില്ല സാർ?
അതെ സാർ, അതായത് ലൈഫ് ലോങ് ഇമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റി ഉണ്ടാകുമെന്ന് ഒരു തവണ ഇൻഫെക്ഷൻ വന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാലേ
കറന്റ് ഡേറ്റ് വെച്ചിട്ടാണ് അങ്ങനെ പറയുന്നത് സാറേ. റീഇൻഫെക്ഷൻ ഉണ്ടാവില്ല ഇതുവരെ റീഇൻഫെക്ഷനെ പറ്റി പറഞ്ഞിട്ടില്ല. സോ യു ആർ ഗോയിങ് ടു ഗെറ്റ് എ ലോങ് സ്റ്റാൻഡിങ് ഇമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റി എന്നുള്ളതാണ് കോൺസെപ്റ്റ്. പക്ഷെ നമ്മൾ ഈ പറയുന്നതൊക്കെ ഈ മേ ബി ഒരു 2014 ശേഷമുള്ള പിക്ചർ വെച്ചല്ലേ പറയുന്നത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് നമുക്ക് അങ്ങനെ 2014 ഓൺവേഴ്സ് ഉള്ള ലിറ്ററേച്ചറിൽ റീഇൻഫെക്ഷൻ ഇസ് നോട്ട് പോസിബിൾ എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. പിന്നെ വേറൊരു കാര്യമുണ്ട്, 80% അസിംപ്റ്റമാറ്റിക് ഇൻഫെക്ഷൻ ഉള്ള ഒരു ഡിസീസിന് റീഇൻഫെക്ഷൻ വന്നാൽ എങ്ങനെ അറിയും എന്നുള്ളൊരു പ്രശ്നം കൂടെ ഉണ്ട്.
സാർ ഒരു ഡൗട്ട് കൂടെ സാർ, ഈ ഗില്ലൻ ബാരെ നമ്മൾ പൊതുവെ കാണുന്ന പോലെ സാർ ഇപ്പൊ ഒരു കാര്യം പറഞ്ഞത്, അതിന്റെ എങ്ങനെയാണ് അതിന്റെ മുന്നോട്ടുള്ള പോക്ക് എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഗില്ലൻ ബാരയുടെ ഈ പെർട്ടിക്കുലർ?
അത് മീൻസ് ഈ എല്ലാം ഈ അക്യൂട്ട് മോട്ടോർ ആക്സിഡൽ ന്യൂറോപ്പതി ടൈപ്പ് ആയിരുന്നു. അതിന്റെ കമ്പയർഡ് ടു അമാൻ ഡ്യൂ ടു ദ ലൈക്ക് ഒരു ബാക്കി GBSന്റെ ട്രിഗേഴ്സിനെ വെച്ച് നോക്കുമ്പോൾ ഈ സിക്കായിട്ട് ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട അമാന്റെ പ്രോഗ്നോസിസ് വാസ് ബെറ്റർ എന്നാണ് ദ സ്റ്റഡി ഫ്രം ഫ്രഞ്ച് പോളിനേഷ്യ, ബ്രസീൽ ആൻഡ് ബ്രസീൽ രണ്ടിലും പ്രോഗ്നോസിസ് വാസ് ബെറ്റർ കമ്പയർഡ് ടു ദ ക്ലാസിക്കൽ AIDP.
ഈ ബെറ്റർ എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ ലൈക്ക് ആർ ദേ ഗെറ്റിംഗ് completely better within
കംപ്ലീറ്റ്ലി
like
സാർ
1 or 2 months.
അതിനകത്ത് ഡെത്ത് അറൌണ്ട് ഒരു 3 to 10% ഒരു കിടപ്പുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ബട്ട് ദെൻ ദ പീരീഡ് വിത്ത് വിച്ച് ദേ ബിക്കേം ബെറ്റർ വാസ് ആക്ച്വലി ഏർലിയർ ഇൻ സിക്ക റിലേറ്റഡ് GBS.